But all right, we are beyond stoked because we are about to start transitioning on over into Just Talking, where our guest is VOX film critic and culture reporter Alissa Wilkinson is back on the Chris Collins Show, Millennial Talk Show. How's it going, my friend?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We are fabulous. Like I was joking with you before on the phone. It's like when I talked with you at February, I felt like I was getting that New York breeze, and now California is finally getting some of that nice tone. So that's a good feeling. But you know, there's a lot of things happening in Hollywood, and one of the first things I wanted to tackle with you is, you know, Hollywood's film industry. You know, they advocate for more inclusion, yet, you know, assistants for writers and showrunners and script coordinators and assistants who work for studios are still being underpaid. And I question this really hardcore because, you know, we had just heard this week that Target is giving benefits, $15 an hour and a $2 bonus with benefits, right? Kids that are assistants that are in undergrad or just get out of grad school like myself, we're still getting underpaid. And some of them are even saying that they were making up to $900 and $1,000 per week, but now it's getting close to $500 and $600. And I don't know about you being in New York, but I know at least in Los Angeles, you cannot live here making that kind of money. So what do you recommend some of these millennials or even the Gen Zs do to stay active during these times?
I mean, it's hard to say right now because we don't really know what's, like it kind of depends what part of the business you're working in. So writing's still happening and pitching and executives, they're still doing all that stuff. But if you work on set or if you kind of work for someone in production, there's nothing for you until production can safely start up. And then even then you might be putting your health at risk. So it's a tricky place that people are in. I know there was a big push kind of coming out of the Me Too movement and Time's Up and those initiatives to have like a union basically for assistants where they're able to bargain for fair pay and also like, not to have to maybe send their bosses dry cleaning out or work 19-hour days, and all other parts of the entertainment business have those unions and they really do protect them from being exploited. So I think it's something that people have to think about. The hard part, of course, is that most people get an assistant job so they can get their foot in the door, and then the worry is like, what if I complain?
Yeah, and that's one of the problems as an artist with the unions. Getting in that union, they make that so difficult. So same thing, I'm like so for unions. I think they fight for our rights, but they also make it so difficult to get in. That needs to be looked at.
Yeah, and of course, if you had a union that was for people who work in assistant jobs, then it would be a little bit of a different situation. So, I think I'm, my workplace unionized recently, and it's been a really good thing for us, especially just in these uncertain economic times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that's exactly why we wanted to address this issue, because you just hit it right on the nose. I mean, this has been going on since the Women's March. And now that, Black Lives Matter is going into effect, and some people are slowly starting to creep that into the Hollywood industry. But I think that's one of the real bigger issues. I mean, we still haven't even fought equality on the payroll level. And do you believe that with the unions, that's what will overall possibly fix the situation, at least in Hollywood?
I think it could make a big difference. Like, it's not going to fix it. But one other thing that can be a problem when like you're really low paid and you're in a kind of precarious situation is that you're more vulnerable to like predatory employers too, who might want to abuse you, assault you, like all of these things. That's the story we hear over and over again. So just having those kind of protections in place, and also just ways to complain or mitigate risk or all of those kinds of things are really important. It's not something that 21-year-olds just out of college are used to having for themselves, but I think this is something that people have been talking about over the past year, and I'm thinking that this whole situation we're in might actually help make clear how important that could be.
And, you were just talking about mitigate the risk, right? And I mean, yeah, Hollywood studios, they want to open up, but we just saw in like Florida, for example, as of Thursday, 3,000 new cases in less than 24 hours. And I know AMC, they've been saying that, I know the CEO came out and was like, I will wear a mask, but I'm not encouraging people that come to my theater to wear a mask. how does he think his essential workers that have to like go and clean up the facility feel about this? Do you think that's a little crazy during a COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah. I mean, so there's I honestly, you know, what he said was, and this is AMC is not the only theater chain. All the major theater chains have come out and said some variants of this, which is that they're not going to require people to wear masks, basically because they don't want to get in the middle of a political situation. But of course, if you say that, you're putting yourself in a political situation, and so they'll say, oh, we'll clean the theaters, we'll make our employees wear masks, which is not all that useful, because the point of a mask isn't to protect you but to protect other people. So they're really kind of showing their hand and trying to not show their hands at the same time.
Well, Hollywood and the I was gonna say the Hollywood and the corporations, I mean, they were really quick to pick up on the Black Square. And a lot of people would say that that's a political movement. So why can't they just trust the health experts that are saying this is still the first wave? It's not gone away. Wear a mask.
What they're most worried about is getting angry customers who feel like it's their right to not wear a mask, and also it's their right to sit in this movie theater, which only one of those things is true. Right? Nobody has a right to come inside any business. So there's not a lot of consistency here. But, you know, I understand movie theaters are struggling. AMC also is, just a month ago, was, you know, supposedly going out of, you know, going to have to go bankrupt. So I understand there's a lot of factors here, but you know, I think there's more people who are going to be worried about going into a theater than there are people who are going to insist that it's somehow their like God-given right to infect other people.
Oh, I totally disagree.
Okay.
Oh, I think that if they try to force people to wear a mask coming in, the backlash and the anger from so many communities. Like, I live in a community that is so pro-mask, which is nice. Alhambra, California, we all wear our masks out here. My dad from OC, Orange County, and not wearing no mask to a movie theater. And I think that there's more Americans out there who don't want to wear a mask. That's like my opinion. I think they're going to go to the theater.
The statistics suggest that there's more people who want to see that enforced across the country, but I think there's a lot of vocal minority. And also those are the stories that get picked up, right? Like, it's not a story to say like, look, there's another person who's wearing one. The other part of this, of course, is that they can only fill the theaters up to about 30%, so they're already cutting themselves off at the knees as far as tickets. But I think really what this points to is a bigger issue, which is that the movie theater industry is very bad at innovating and very stuck to their ways. And where you see innovation happening is with the smaller independent cinemas or some of the other kind of real small chains, where they've been thinking about like, well, how can we open other revenue streams and how can we create other experiences? And they're still in a tough spot. But it's the bigger chains that want to throw their weight around and put other people's, you know, health in danger.
Well, hopefully they step up during these crazy times, because it's absolutely out of control. Right. But I definitely wanted to touch upon this because today is Juneteenth. That is an American holiday celebrated on June 19th, commemorating the day in 1865 when the Emancipation Proclamation, the federal order in ending slavery in the U.S., was read to enslaved African Americans in Texas. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know what Juneteenth was. I'm going to be real clear. I honestly did not learn any of this when I was in junior high or high school. Everybody knows Emancipation Proclamation. I hope so. I mean, gosh, I'd be really concerned about the youth. But why do you feel like this holiday is so important to talk about for the future years to come?
I think one reason is that it's the first day on which every American was actually free. You know, so what's interesting is that Juneteenth happened, I think, 2.5 years after those slaves were actually declared free. So they were free people who thought they were slaves, and nobody had told them they weren't, right? So they were working for free labor for 2.5 years and likely being mistreated and all of these things. So I think one really important part of celebrating this holiday is recognizing that that's an injustice unto itself, right? Along with all of the other injustice.
Well,
and so it's the first day that everyone who was free actually knew they were
yeah,
free.
I think one of the biggest injustice were the slave owners knew about the proclamation and chose not to say, and they banded together as a state, as a community of Texas, to not tell people that there. And did you know, quick trivia, where did a bunch of Texas slave owners move to right after the proclamation was read on Juneteenth? What country?
Oh, what?
Brazil.
Country?
It was Brazil. Yep, they moved there and started their own slave nation.
Wow. Yes, yeah, I would have never known that, but I know, at least for you, Alissa, you know, being a film critic, what have you learned from, you know, watching Black cinema?
Yeah, you know, obviously I'm white. I grew up in a predominantly white community. I grew up in upstate New York. I had contact with and friends who were Black, but I wasn't really, you know, that was like another world for me. And so one thing I think movies do really well is help us to enter into someone else's experience, not in the sense that like now I know what it is to be Black, right? But I can listen to other people's stories and understand kind of their experiences. And so it's been really great, especially as Hollywood has just barely pried the door open for you know, one thing that I've really been writing about a lot over the past few years is that Hollywood has long considered white audiences to be like the default for what a movie is for. So like so you know, this is a movie about a man and a woman, but then if they're Black, then it's a movie for Black people about a man and a woman.
I mean, sadly, that's true. That's very true.
And that's how they think about it. And so movies like Get Out and Black Panther that do extremely well at the box office,
but that does really do feel like Black cinema, though. That was very much, I would say, you know, the empowerment of the African American community.
Sure, but I think what's interesting is that those movies were considered to be surprising that they had done well with white people, because movie executives thought, oh well, white people aren't going to go see a movie about Black people.
It's Marvel, though. I mean, that's what it's a superhero. I mean, what did they not expect?
I think there's a real lack of imagination among Hollywood executives.
And also, you had mentioned right now Spike Lee's new movie, The Five Blood.
Phenomenal.
Whoa! Oh my gosh, I haven't actually finished it. I tried to finish it last night, but my daughter woke up. Unfortunately,
very long.
It's a very long one. I'm almost done, but the history ingrained in that movie for people who want to know about Black history and the storytelling that Spike Lee did. I mean, if you want to talk about it a little bit as the film critic, because you did
oh my gosh,
5.
It's so good. So far, it's one of the best of the year. It's on Netflix, we should say, which is a big deal because it means most anyone can see it. But yeah, I mean, it's a movie about 4 Black Vietnam vets who go back to Vietnam, like basically in the present day, in search of some gold that's buried there, and also the remains of their buddy who died over there. And then one of them, their son, comes along too. But what the movie does really well is figure out how to show us that there's kind of a continuum between the civil rights movement and the, you know, there was like an extraordinary number of Black soldiers in, you know, way out of proportion to white soldiers during the Vietnam War, the way they were treated, the way they've lived, and then the Black Lives Matter movement. And you can kind of see this continuum, and Spike is really good at showing how history affects the present and vice versa. It's also very funny. And it's very
funny.
Like,
it's
explosive. And
no, I really loved it a lot. I honestly, I felt more bad for the veterans, honestly, on a level. It just really made me feel like we haven't done enough in this country to support these soldiers when they come back. And especially that toll of, you know, going from, you know, Vietnam and then going into present day. I felt the effect. And I think what's so powerful about that film is you don't know any of the actors. They're all theater actors, and they're so phenomenal. And
Which is why they're so good. I'm sorry,
so
good. Theater actor, you are a better actor.
It's so true. But I want to kind of switch gears on this because, Amanda, I really wanted to ask you this because I know the Academy is planning a new task force for inclusion to bring systematic change to the cinema industry. I've had a lot of friends I know that do a podcast called The Colored Cast who have also questioned what this task force is really going to do for anybody. So could you explain what it really is? Because every time I look up an article on it, it's very little to no information on it.
Well, they haven't really announced, there's a reason for that. Nobody knows, because they haven't really announced what it is yet. They just kind of announced that it's happening. They've been in the middle of a lot of crazy things right now, because of course they're kind of dealing with trying to think about their own lack of diversity on the one hand, and also deal with like the pandemic on the other. So I think their focus was on figuring out what happens with the Oscars, which I'm sure we'll mention. But it is true, they've added, I know they added Ava DuVernay, who directed Selma and 13th and those movies, to kind of this task force, and they're talking about trying to find a way to require a certain level of diversity to have been involved in the production of a film in order for it to be eligible for an Oscar. So that wouldn't say like you must, for all of time, all movies must hire this percentage. They're just saying if you want to be eligible for an award, then you need to show that you did the work to staff diversely. And I think that's pretty important.
That's fair.
anyone who's ever worked in the movie industry knows that you basically hire your friends. Like, it's all networking all the time, right? You don't post job postings. Someone gets hired and then they hire all the people they like. So that's great. But what that also has the effect of doing normally is keeping things less diverse and not more diverse. And that actually can be really bad for movies, right? Because the more people from different backgrounds, different experiences, different ways of seeing the world that you have in one place, the more rich and diverse.
And it's not enough to just have the inclusion writers, where your writers are diverse, but it has to go from the bottom level grips all the way up to the top, CEO, production. I mean, who's in the room, who's helping make these decisions? All I have to ask though is, I'm not a big fan of the word task force.
I
something about that. I'm like, I love the idea, but I'm like, can we find like, I don't know, task force, like Space Force, Task Force?
Yeah, I don't know. It's the Academy though. They're always going to do that, right?
Well, Marissa, you're actually getting onto something, because I know, Alissa, you are a culture reporter. And one of the things that popped up, I actually tweeted at Kristen Bell, the actress. I just want to say before we begin, she's a phenomenal actress.
I loved her tweet back.
Nothing to be attacking her on her acting. I want to ask you, because I've been thinking about what I said to her, and I've gotten a response back from Kristen Bell, and I sort of feel like I'm acting like a Karen now. And I'm wondering if I'm a part of the cancel culture. So, Marissa, if you could share on the screen the tweets that were going. So I responded to Kristen Bell's brand new book that she has, her first children's book that's called The World Needs More Purple People. And she released this book 3 weeks into the Black Lives Matter protests. And obviously, as you can see on the left side, I read the first couple pages of Kristen Bell's new children's book, and it's about sharing the color purple with the world. But come on, how does no one at Random House Kids not have the common sense to read the title and be alarmed by how racially insensitive it is?
And then I commented, because immediately when I hear the purple people, what popped into my head is the song One-Eyed, One-Horn, Flying Purple People Eater.
Absolutely.
Which is very racist undertones, which I didn't know about as a kid learning till later. And so I immediately was like, all I can think of is the racist song Purple People Eater, LOL. She obviously didn't have a diverse panel on her marketing team.
Yeah, and then obviously you see right here, Kristen Bell responds, I'm sorry that brings up a terribly racist idea in your head. Let's retire that song and never think of it again. Our purple people are kind, inclusive, hard workers, laugh a lot, love being uniquely themselves. But the problem that I have with this is it's a children's book. And what she's trying to say is when you put red and blue together, it makes purple, right? And obviously she's trying to talk about politics. But the thing is, what 6-year-old is really going to know anything about politics? And let me throw this at you, Alissa, because the reason I'm alarmed by this, when I say racially insensitive, I say it's not necessary. Because when I say this, all white people are an open canvas. And we accept all colors, but yellow people, they wear glasses, they're really good at technology, but they're bad drivers. And I didn't even say a race, and everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about. And do you but then again, I'm a huge fan of Patrice O'Neal and Ralphie May and George Carlin and Gabriel Iglesias. And am I being part of the problem? Is this like, you know, because I feel like I'm becoming one of these like impulse social media justice warriors, and I've been feeling really guilty. And what do you see about this situation? I mean, is it really that outrageous, or?
Well, so I saw that the book was coming out, and I have no idea what this song is. I've never heard it ever. So it's possible, you know, these things, they pop up in pockets. That would probably, I think it's probably more accurate that there's a class and regional kind of bias in their marketing team. Right? But I think, you know, we always have to think about whether my experience is the most obvious one or not. And I think we're learning a lot about diversity in that way, that, you know, what I immediately think of might not be what someone else does, but vice versa.
And I have to admit, I loved her tweet in the sense that it did make me go, let me check what was in my head. I bought the book from my daughter's library because purple is her favorite color. It is a good book, but I do still think that the diversity team was not there to say, hey, why not push it more about the red and blue political state makes purple. We all love each other. And then I wouldn't have thought of that.
But then again,
although the question is, what would Prince say, right? So
yes.
What would Prince say? I guess that's a good point. But then at the same time, you know, we could be talking about this for hours, but definitely kids out there, don't be like me. Don't become that cancel culture. Don't become a Karen. But Alissa Wilkinson, thanks for joining the Chris Collins Show Millennial Talk Show. And where can they follow you on social media?
I'm on Twitter a lot at Alissa Marie.
All right, rock and roll.
And if you like what you're listening to, please go to thechriscollinsshow.com and become a member today. And you can get a free CCS t-shirt.
That's all the green screen. Well, thank you, Alissa. I appreciate it.